3 weeks ago, a commercial satellite, just doing its usual thing, snapped a picture of the desert outside Bahawalpur. Nothing unusual, right? But then analysts, the kind who live and breathe satellite imagery, zoomed in. They measured the crater meticulously and then they froze. That scorch pattern? It matched almost perfectly the footprint of a 9,000-mile missile. Think about that for a second. Islamabad still insists its nukes are India only, a purely regional deterrent. So why, you have to ask, are they testing a weapon that can comfortably leave Indian airspace, cross the entire Indian Ocean, and potentially even reach the Atlantic seaboard? That single, stark image is forcing Washington, Delhi, and Beijing to ask the same uncomfortable question tonight. Is Pakistan quietly, perhaps stealthily, building its first intercontinental ballistic missile? And if the answer is yes, what on earth is the real game being played here? The implications are staggering, and they stretch far beyond South Asia. The official story. For a quarter century now, Pakistan's army has, with unwavering consistency, repeated the same mantra, almost like a sacred vow. Our strategic program is minimum, credible, India-specific. It's not just a casual statement. This doctrine even has its own acronym, CMD, Credible Minimum Deterrence. And every single budget line, every missile nameplate unveiled with pomp and circumstance, every diplomatic talking point delivered in hushed tones, has been meticulously crafted to bend toward that singular mission. Their current longest-range missile, the Shaheen-3, with its impressive 2,050-kilometer reach, already covers every single Indian runway from the frosty peaks of Kashmir down to the distant strategic Andaman and Nicobar Islands. From Pakistan's perspective, that basket, the India basket, is already securely covered. So it begs the question, why on earth would they then pour precious cash, resources, and engineering talent into developing rocket motors, massive enough to threaten cities like Frankfurt or Chicago? It simply doesn't align with their stated doctrine, does it? The Foreign Office, bless their diplomatic hearts, still swears these rumors are nothing but fantasy, the fever dreams of overzealous intelligence agencies. But then December's U.S. sanctions list clearly didn't get that memo. It blacklisted 3 Pakistani defense labs, explicitly citing their involvement in pursuing long-range missile technologies that could threaten the continental United States. Now, someone here is clearly not telling the whole truth. One side is lying, or at the very least being strategically opaque. And it's precisely in that gaping chasm between the official press release and the undeniable, cold, hard facts of the paperwork, the sanctions, the satellite images, that our story truly begins to unfold. This isn't just about technical capabilities. It's about a profound disconnect between public statements and covert actions, forcing us to look much deeper into Islamabad's true intentions, the hardware we can see. Let's talk shop for a moment. Let's speak engineer for about 90 seconds, because the devil, as they say, is in the technical details. An ICBM, or Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, isn't just a Shaheen-3 that's been stretched out a bit, given a stronger engine, and told to fly further. Oh no, it's an entirely different beast altogether, a fundamentally distinct animal in terms of engineering and complexity. To build one, you need a first-stage motor, a true Leviathan, capable of burning something like 40 tons of solid propellant in a matter of seconds. Imagine the sheer power, the controlled explosion required for that. Then you need a guidance computer so incredibly precise, so robust, that it can hit a target circle the size of a cricket pitch. Think about that accuracy, from 10 time zones away. That's navigating across continents with pinpoint precision, resisting all sorts of interference. And finally, you need a re-entry vehicle, the warhead delivery system, that can survive temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun as it plunges back through Earth's atmosphere at hypersonic speeds. We're talking about materials science pushed to its absolute limits, aerodynamic challenges that defy belief, and heat shielding that makes the space shuttle look like child's play. Historically, Pakistan has never mass-produced any of these 3 critical subsystems, not the colossal rocket motors, not the hyper-accurate guidance systems, and certainly not the extreme re-entry vehicles. But here's the kicker, until now. Western analysts meticulously tracking global import licenses and trade flows have recently reported a significant spike in carbon fiber orders by Pakistani entities. We're not talking about small amounts for aircraft parts. We're talking about quantities large enough, experts estimate, to construct casings for potentially 200 rocket bodies. Carbon fiber, for those unfamiliar, is incredibly strong and lightweight, absolutely essential for the structural integrity and performance of long-range missiles. This isn't just a casual purchase. It signals a serious industrial-scale endeavor. Then there's the guidance system. A Chinese consortium, known for its dual-use technologies, reportedly sold Pakistan inertial reference units, IRUs, that are specifically rated for intercontinental trajectories. These aren't just fancy compasses. IRUs are the heart of a missile's navigation, providing critical data on position, velocity, and orientation without relying on external signals, making them virtually unjammable. Their intercontinental rating is a dead giveaway. And just last year, adding another layer to this clandestine puzzle, a German court fined a shipping firm for attempting to export highly sensitive gyroscopes, crucial components for missile guidance, to Pakistan. Cunningly disguised on manifests as mere elevator parts, gyroscopes provide the stability and directionality that allow a missile to stay on course over thousands of miles. When you add all these breadcrumbs together, the massive carbon fiber orders, the intercontinental rated guidance systems, the illicit gyroscope shipments, you start to see a very clear picture forming. You get a rocket, at least on paper, roughly the height and capability of the venerable U.S. Minuteman III, a missile capable of delivering a 1-ton payload, typically a nuclear warhead, over an astonishing 12,000 kilometers. If that thing ever flies, and all signs point to the intent to make it fly, then Paris, London, and Washington, D.C. suddenly sit uncomfortably inside the same, very dangerous, strike arc. This isn't theoretical. This is about tangible hardware, and it's a game changer. Why build beyond India? So again, we come back to the fundamental question, the why. Why would Pakistan, a nation with limited resources and a stated India-specific doctrine, pursue capabilities that stretch across continents? Strategy textbooks, those ancient tomes of geopolitical wisdom, typically offer 3 classic compelling reasons for any nation to develop such a weapon. First, and perhaps most immediately, there's deterrence against the United States. Pakistani planners, watching the agonizing weeks of the 1999 Kargil War unfold, saw firsthand how American diplomatic and economic pressure forced a rapid climb down. Washington's influence was undeniable, a stark reminder of who held the ultimate leverage. A missile that can genuinely hold New York, Chicago, or Washington, D.C. at risk fundamentally flips that pressure dynamic. In any future showdown with India, where U.S. intervention might once again be a decisive factor, the existence of a Pakistani ICBM would introduce an entirely new calculus. It's about creating a deterrence envelope that complicates or even negates American military or diplomatic coercion, ensuring Pakistan has a stronger hand in any regional conflict. It's a way of saying, don't box us in or the consequences could be global. Second, there's the allure of currencying great power status. This isn't just about military might. It's about prestige, about a seat at the big kids' table. Only a handful of states, the permanent members of the UN Security Council essentially, openly possess operational ICBMs. Joining that exclusive club instantly elevates a nation's standing on the global stage. It buys you a permanent, undeniable seat in every future non-proliferation debate, granting you a voice that simply can't be ignored. It's a symbol of technological prowess, strategic independence, and a claim to being a serious player in international affairs, far beyond your immediate neighborhood. For a nation like Pakistan, often perceived as a client state or a regional actor, this could be a powerful statement of self-reliance and global ambition. Third, and perhaps most subtly, there's a technological inevitability. Geopolitics isn't static, especially in South Asia. India, Pakistan's arch-rival, isn't sitting still. They are actively testing and developing the Agni-Vi, a missile projected to have an 8,000-kilometer reach. Islamabad, quite understandably, fears a future scenario where India, backed by advanced capabilities and potentially bolstered by U.S. missile defense ships in the Pacific, could contemplate a first strike capability against Pakistan, believing its own assets to be protected. An ICBM changes that equation dramatically. A Pakistani ICBM, specifically designed to loop south over Africa and strike Washington, D.C. from the southeast, would cunningly bypass existing American interceptor radars, which are primarily aligned and optimized to detect threats coming over the North Pole. This isn't just about matching India. It's about ensuring a survivable second strike capability and introducing an element of surprise that complicates any adversary's defensive planning. So pick your motive, whether it's counter-coercion against a superpower, the pursuit of global prestige, or simply a defensive response to a relentless regional arms race. Each reason, independently or collectively, points unequivocally to the same hardware, an intercontinental ballistic missile. The strategic logic, however convoluted, is undeniably present. China's helping hand. Now let's be blunt, none of this happens in a vacuum. A program of this magnitude, this technological complexity, requires robust supply chains, advanced manufacturing capabilities, and often, external assistance. And in Pakistan's case, that chain, time and again, keeps leading straight back to Beijing. It's an open secret, whispered in intelligence circles and increasingly evident in open-source intelligence. Private satellite photos, the kind that offer an unfiltered, almost voyeuristic glimpse into sensitive facilities, have repeatedly shown Chinese heavy-lift transporters, enormous aircraft capable of moving significant payloads, operating at the Pakistani missile factory located in Fateh Jung. This isn't just a casual visit. These are the logistical arteries of a serious military-industrial collaboration. U.S. intelligence agencies, sifting through mountains of data, are convinced that China has transferred the very same sophisticated solid-fuel casting chambers it once provided to North Korea. What does that mean in practical terms? It essentially means gifting Pakistan a decade, perhaps even more, of painstaking trial and error, research and development. Solid fuel motors are notoriously difficult to master, requiring precise casting and curing processes to ensure reliability and performance. By providing these chambers, China has effectively fast-tracked Pakistan's journey into advanced missile propulsion, saving them untold time and resources. But why would Beijing underwrite such a sensitive, potentially destabilizing venture? The answer, as always, lies in the grand chessboard of global power politics. From China's perspective, a second Asian nuclear power, one capable of menacing Washington, D.C., is not a problem. It's a strategic advantage, a profound complication for American naval planning. Think about it. If the U.S. 7th Fleet, the cornerstone of American power projection in the Pacific, must simultaneously keep a vigilant eye on the volatile South China Sea and the increasingly strategic Arabian Sea, its margin for defending Taiwan, arguably America's most critical geopolitical commitment in Asia, shrinks dramatically. It stretches their resources, dilutes their focus, and introduces an element of strategic uncertainty for Washington. From China's cynical, long-term viewpoint, a Pakistani ICBM isn't a headache or a liability. It is quite simply a force multiplier. And the best part for Beijing? This multiplier is priced not in expensive Chinese yuan, but in Pakistani gratitude and strategic alignment. It's a cost-effective way to tie down American resources and attention without firing a single shot themselves. It's a classic example of proxy strategic leverage, and it's a move that Beijing seems increasingly willing to play. India's nightmare feedback loop. Of course, none of this goes unnoticed. New Delhi, Pakistan's historically adversarial neighbor, isn't deaf. They hear the same engine tests rumbling in the desert. They see the same satellite images, and they respond as rivals always do. India's defense budget, a document scrutinized by analysts worldwide, quietly added a substantial $2 billion this year. And what was this additional funding earmarked for? Phase 2 ballistic missile tracking radars. Now, these aren't just any radars. These are the sophisticated, long-range, high-resolution systems that you only truly need if your adversary is developing intercontinental reach. It's a direct, unambiguous signal that India is preparing for a new, more dangerous era of missile threats. Indian strategists, in their public writings and academic papers, are now openly articulating a chilling new reality. Deterrence against Pakistan, they argue, now requires the ability to preemptively destroy missiles deeper inside Pakistani territory, not just along the immediate border. This is a significant shift. It moves beyond traditional border skirmishes and limited counterstrikes. This logic, this terrifying new strategic imperative, inherently drives shorter warning times. It pushes both sides towards hair-trigger alert levels, where decisions must be made in minutes, not hours. And what are shorter warning times and hair-trigger alerts? They are the classic textbook ingredients of an accidental war, a conflict triggered by miscalculation, technical glitch, or sheer panic, rather than deliberate intent. The paradox here is brutal, almost Shakespearean in its tragic irony. Pakistan believes it's building an ICBM to deter a combined India plus America threat, to enhance its security. But India reacts by shortening its reaction times, by developing preemptive capabilities that raise the stakes exponentially. In this terrifying feedback loop, both sides, despite their best intentions to enhance security, end up far less safe than before. The very act of seeking ultimate deterrence inadvertently creates a more volatile, more dangerous regional environment. It's a race to the bottom, where stability is sacrificed for perceived yet fleeting advantage. Washington's sanction playbook. So what's America's countermove in this intricate dance? Historically and predictably, it's sanctions. But here's the rub. Sanctions, as potent as they once were, are increasingly looking like a 1990s tool trying to grapple with 2020's globalization. The world has changed, supply chains are far more diversified, and economic power is no longer concentrated in just a few Western capitals. Take December's sanctions list, for example. It freezes the dollar assets of 3 Pakistani defense labs. On paper, that sounds impactful, doesn't it? But in reality, these are firms that barely, if ever, hold significant dollar assets. Their transactions are often in other currencies, or through informal channels, precisely because they operate in sensitive sectors. The sanctions also ban U.S. technology exports to these entities. Again, seems strong. But the uncomfortable truth is that many of those critical technologies, or perfectly adequate substitutes, can now be sourced from Europe, from China, or even from emerging markets with less stringent export controls. The technological chokehold America once enjoyed has loosened considerably. The only real palpable pain inflicted by these sanctions, ironically, is often diplomatic and personal. Every Pakistani officer who trained at the prestigious Fort Leavenworth, a career highlight for many, now needs a special waiver just to enter the United States. That matters for personal prestige, for professional networking, for the informal channels of communication that help de-escalate crises. But does it stop a casting shop in Rawalpindi from pouring another massive motor tube for an ICBM? Absolutely not. The economic lever, the traditional tool of American foreign policy, remains largely broken when it comes to sophisticated state-sponsored programs like this. Unless Washington is prepared to take the far more drastic and geopolitically fraught step of sanctioning major Chinese banks that clear payments for these long-range rocket alloys or guidance systems, the economic lever will continue to be ineffective. Such a move would send shockwaves through the global financial system and severely strain U.S.-China relations, a cost Washington seems reluctant for now to pay. Until then, the Pakistani program, fueled by ambition and external assistance, will likely keep crawling forward, largely unhindered by America's conventional sanction playbook. The nuclear taboo test. It's easy in the flurry of technical specifications and geopolitical maneuvering to forget the most significant word at the heart of this discussion: nuclear. We often just say ICBM, but what we're really talking about is a vehicle for nuclear warheads. Pakistan is still, by most estimates, 5 to 7 years away from successfully miniaturizing a warhead light enough to be carried by a true intercontinental range missile. This isn't a trivial task. It requires incredibly complex engineering, material science, and physics to shrink a powerful destructive device down to a manageable size and weight for a missile payload. But once that rocket, the delivery system, exists and is proven, the physics package, the miniaturized warhead, will inevitably follow. The engineers will get there. The moment that integration happens, the moment a Pakistani ICBM can credibly carry a nuclear warhead to any major city on the planet, the world will cross a profound psychological Rubicon. It won't just be another missile. It will be a Muslim-majority state, gaining the ability to strike any capital on the planet. This prospect, this new reality, rattles the fragile framework of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, far more profoundly than North Korea ever did. Why? Because Pakistan isn't an isolated pariah state. It's a complex frontline state strategically located, hosting American troops involved in counter-terrorism operations, a vital node in China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, and a recipient of substantial Saudi investment. It's deeply embedded in the global fabric, making its nuclear capabilities a much more intricate and potentially volatile problem. If the international community genuinely wants to keep the nearly 8-decade-old taboo on nuclear use alive, that unspoken yet powerful norm against employing these horrific weapons, then the safest, most prudent route is to ensure that taboo is never stress-tested by a Pakistani ICBM. The implications of such a test, or worse, an operational deployment, could trigger a cascade of events forever altering the global nuclear landscape and making the world a far more dangerous place. The psychological barrier against global nuclear proliferation is already thin. This could be the crack that breaks it entirely. Global proliferation dominoes. Let's envision the Non-Proliferation Treaty, that painstakingly constructed international agreement, as a precarious Jenga tower. It's built on a delicate balance of trust, deterrence, and shared commitment. Now imagine pulling out the Pakistan piece. What happens? Other pieces, other nations inevitably begin to wobble. The stability of the entire structure is compromised. Consider Saudi Arabia. They already fund a significant portion of Pakistan's defense budget, a clear indication of their close strategic ties. Riyadh, deeply concerned about Iran's own nuclear ambitions and regional influence, could very well decide that a ready-made ICBM, perhaps acquired directly from Pakistan or with Pakistani assistance, is the ultimate insurance policy. It's a direct route to balancing power in the Persian Gulf, but one that would drastically destabilize the region. Then there's Turkey, a rising regional power watching these developments unfold. Why, they might wonder, should they continue to settle for NATO's nuclear umbrella, relying on the goodwill of others when they could possess their own? National pride, strategic autonomy, and a desire for greater regional leverage could easily push Ankara down a similar path. And what about Egypt? Locked in an increasingly desperate water war over the vital Nile River, they might start asking whether missiles, particularly long-range ones, buy them additional leverage in those critical negotiations, a means to project power and secure their national interests. Each new aspirant, each nation that decides to pursue or acquire ICBM capabilities, shortens the path for the next. It normalizes the idea, lowers the political and moral barriers, and creates a sense of inevitability. And as this happens, the global center of gravity on non-proliferation, once firmly anchored in the established rules-based capitals like Vienna, slowly but surely slides towards Riyadh, Ankara, and Cairo. These are capitals with vastly different strategic cultures, often far looser export controls, and a much more transactional approach to international security than Islamabad, let alone Washington or London. The Jenga tower, once wobbly, could soon come crashing down, ushering in an era of unprecedented nuclear instability. Economic cost of a rocket kingdom. Now, here's the part Pakistani generals rarely, if ever, mention on state television, and for good reason. An ICBM program is ruinously, almost unimaginably, expensive. It's not just the cost of building the missiles themselves. Every single flight test, a crucial step in proving reliability and capability, costs north of $50 million. And that's before you even factor in the specialized range safety ships and monitoring aircraft positioned thousands of miles downrange in the Indian Ocean to track the missile's trajectory and ensure no accidental debris or malfunctions endanger international shipping or populations. This isn't a one-off expenditure. It's a recurring colossal drain on national resources. To establish a truly credible ICBM force, one that can withstand a first strike and deliver a retaliatory blow, you're not talking about a single missile. You're talking about a minimum of 20 operational missiles plus at least 2 spare warheads for every missile, because you need redundancy and the ability to replace damaged or malfunctioning components. And then for survivability, you need 3 hardened silos deep underground and reinforced for every single rocket to protect them from preemptive attack. Run the spreadsheet on those numbers, factor in the research, development, testing, infrastructure, and personnel, and you quickly blow past $10 billion. $10 billion. That's roughly half of Pakistan's entire annual federal tax revenue. And that's before you even start buying the early warning satellites and sophisticated command and control systems necessary to manage such a force. The country currently allocates about 2.8% of its GDP to defense spending. Adding an ICBM program with all its attendant costs would inevitably push that figure past 4%, a critical threshold that the International Monetary Fund IMF, considers unsustainable for most emerging markets. Beyond that point, the economic strain becomes crippling, diverting funds from essential public services, infrastructure, and development. In short, and this is a stark choice, you can have a robust welfare state, investing in education, healthcare, and social safety nets for your citizens, or you can have intercontinental ballistic missiles. But you, as a developing nation, simply cannot finance both simultaneously without risking economic collapse. The opportunity cost is immense, and it's a burden that will fall squarely on the shoulders of ordinary Pakistani citizens. The bureaucratic civil war inside Islamabad. It's crucial to understand that not every institution within Pakistan's complex, often fractured government wants this particular toy. This isn't a unanimous national project. In fact, there's a quiet but fierce bureaucratic civil war unfolding within Islamabad itself. The Foreign Office, for instance, worries intensely that an ICBM program, with its inevitable international scrutiny and potential sanctions, could kill any lingering chance of trading with the European Union under the highly beneficial GSP Plus scheme. This scheme grants Pakistani goods preferential access to EU markets, a lifeline for its struggling economy. Jeopardizing that for a missile seems, to them, like a catastrophic miscalculation. The Finance Ministry, constantly battling to keep the national economy afloat, is gripped by a different kind of fear. That credit rating agencies like Moody's will swiftly cut Pakistan's sovereign rating to junk status the very day a missile test leaves the atmosphere. A junk rating means higher borrowing costs, capital flight, and a severe blow to investor confidence, plunging the country deeper into financial crisis. Even within the powerful army, the old guard, the more seasoned and pragmatically minded officers, argue that the only existential threat Pakistan truly faces is India. For them, deterrence against India has already been credibly achieved with their existing arsenal. Why, they ask, risk so much for something that doesn't enhance that primary deterrent? The real push, the driving force behind this ICBM ambition, seems to emanate from a younger cohort of officers. These are individuals who perhaps trained in the United States, who tasted the intoxicating allure of superpower life, of strategic parity, and came home convinced that Pakistan, too, deserves that same exclusive club membership. They see it as a symbol of national strength, a necessary step towards true strategic independence. Whoever wins that bureaucratic knife fight, that intense internal struggle for influence and resources, will ultimately determine whether the next missile design moves from the drafting table, a mere concept, to the actual launch pad, a terrifying reality. The stakes couldn't be higher, both for Pakistan and for global stability. 5 scenarios for 2030. Let's game out the future a bit, shall we? Let's fast forward to 2030 and consider 5 plausible scenarios, each with its own set of implications. Scenario 1. Pakistan, under immense and sustained U.S. pressure, perhaps coupled with significant economic incentives, quietly cancels the program. They accept a permanent, India-centric posture, focusing their strategic assets solely on regional deterrence. The probability? We'll give that about 15%. It's possible, but requires a significant shift in internal dynamics and external leverage. Scenario 2. Islamabad builds the ICBM but never openly tests it, keeping it in the basement, so to speak, much like Israel has done with its alleged nuclear arsenal. They trade the ambiguity of possession for leverage, maintaining the threat without provoking an overt crisis. This deliberate ambiguity allows them to reap some of the strategic benefits without incurring the full diplomatic and economic costs of open deployment. Probability 35%. This seems like a strategically appealing middle ground option. Scenario 3. A single, dramatic test in 2028 triggers a furious reaction from both India and the United States, leading to severe economic sanctions. However, from Pakistan's perspective, this test successfully cements their deterrence against both regional and global powers, proving their capability despite the international outcry. The cost is high, but the strategic goal is achieved. Probability 25%. A risky but potentially rewarding path for Islamabad. Scenario 4. Saudi Arabia, increasingly anxious about regional rivals, bankrolls the deployment of the Pakistani ICBMs in exchange for off-the-shelf access to the technology, or perhaps even a direct transfer of missiles. This would instantly turn the Persian Gulf into a terrifying nuclear triangle, dramatically escalating tensions in an already volatile region. Probability 15%. The financial incentives for Pakistan could be immense, but the global repercussions would be catastrophic. Scenario 5. We see an uncontrolled arms race spiral in South Asia, where every action by one side triggers an equal and opposite reaction from the other. This culminates in a South Asian Cuban Missile moment 10 years from now, a terrifying standoff where the world holds its breath, teetering on the brink of nuclear conflict. The parallels to the 1962 crisis are chilling: short decision times, high alert levels, and the constant threat of miscalculation. Probability 10%. While hopefully low, it's a risk that cannot be ignored. Add them up, and the most likely outcome dominating the probabilities points towards ambiguous possession without open deployment. But make no mistake, even ambiguity, even the perception of intercontinental capability, still forces the world to treat Pakistan as an intercontinental power. The very possibility changes everything. What should Washington do? So what's a smart, effective diplomatic strategy for Washington in this complex, dangerous game? It starts with a crucial distinction: separating the Pakistani motive from the means. Washington needs to understand why Pakistan feels compelled to pursue these capabilities, even if it vehemently opposes the how. A truly smart approach would involve offering a revived security dialogue, one that genuinely recognizes Pakistan's deep-seated fears of American-enabled Indian coercion. This means acknowledging their legitimate security concerns, rather than simply dismissing them. But this dialogue must be paired with tangible incentives. Washington could tie economic carrots, significant financial aid, investment, or trade benefits, to verifiable caps on missile range. For instance, negotiating a limit of, say, 4,000 kilometers. That's more than enough range to cover every inch of India, satisfying their core India-specific deterrence doctrine. But it falls far short of reaching Denver or any other continental U.S. city. It's a pragmatic compromise. Complementing this, Washington should actively pursue a revived trade deal on textiles, a sector absolutely vital to Pakistan's economy. Giving the Pakistani treasury a robust economic off-ramp, a clear path to prosperity not tied to military development, could be a powerful disincentive to ICBM ambitions. Simultaneously, the U.S. needs to raise the cost for Beijing. This means being prepared to sanction Chinese banks that are demonstrably clearing payments for long-range rocket alloys, advanced guidance systems, or other critical components. This would be a challenging diplomatic move, but it's the only way to truly impact China's willingness to underwrite Pakistan's program. This mix of reassurance and punishment, of carrots and sticks, isn't new. It worked remarkably well to cap South Korean missile capabilities in the 1970s, where the U.S. offered security guarantees and economic aid in exchange for limits on Seoul's missile range. The formula, though needing adaptation, can absolutely work again. But Washington has to act decisively and creatively before the first solid motor tube turns into a fully flight-ready intercontinental rocket. The window for influence is closing rapidly. What should Delhi do? And what about India? What's the wisest course of action for New Delhi, a nation directly impacted by these developments? India's worst possible response, the most counterproductive, would be preemptive chest-thumping, a knee-jerk military escalation that only fuels the regional arms race. Far wiser, far more strategically astute, is to let the world feel the threat alongside India. This isn't just an Indian problem. It's a global one. Delhi should quietly and discreetly share its intelligence, particularly high-resolution satellite images and technical analyses, with European Union diplomats. The goal here isn't to provoke, but to allow Brussels to internalize the risk. To understand that a Pakistani ICBM isn't just a distant South Asian issue, but a direct threat to European capitals as well. This builds international consensus and pressure without India having to appear as the sole aggrieved party. Furthermore, India should accelerate its ballistic missile defense cooperation with key regional partners like Japan and Australia. This means deepening intelligence sharing, collaborating on radar technologies, and potentially integrating their defensive systems. The aim is to transform the Quad, that informal strategic dialogue between the U.S., India, Japan, and Australia, into a sophisticated, interoperable radar net that comprehensively covers the entire Indian Ocean region. Such a network would provide early warning and tracking capabilities, enhancing regional security and demonstrating a united front against proliferation. Above all, India must strive to maintain the moral high ground. This means signing a no-first-use declaration specifically for ICBM range missiles. This powerful diplomatic gesture would put Pakistan in an uncomfortable position. It would force them either to match the pledge, thereby committing to a more responsible nuclear posture, or to look like the reckless party, unwilling to commit to such a fundamental principle of nuclear restraint. Deterrence ultimately is as much psychological as it is military, and in that psychological battle, looking reasonable, responsible, and committed to de-escalation is half the battle won. It shifts the burden of proof and the onus of aggression squarely onto Islamabad. What should Islamabad ask of itself? Finally, and perhaps most critically, Pakistani leaders need to engage in a profound moment of national introspection. They need to decide with clear eyes and honest hearts what kind of country they truly want to bequeath to their children and grandchildren. Do they envision a mid-tier economy, vibrant and integrated into global supply chains benefiting from international trade and investment? Or do they choose to build a fortress state, isolated and perpetually on edge, living precariously on a diet of Chinese loans and Saudi grants, its future held hostage by military ambition? An ICBM, while undeniably buying headlines and perhaps a temporary surge of national pride, cannot feed the 45 million young Pakistanis who will enter the job market over this crucial decade. It cannot build schools, hospitals, or the infrastructure necessary for a thriving modern economy. The ultimate, most enduring form of deterrence isn't a missile. It is prosperity. No neighbor, however aggressive, invades a country whose markets they desperately need, whose stability is intertwined with their own economic well-being. A thriving, integrated Pakistan is a secure Pakistan. Imagine if the same brilliant engineers currently toiling away on missile blueprints were instead put to work building microsatellites for weather forecasting, precision agriculture, or environmental monitoring. Pakistan could then export invaluable data to Africa, to Central Asia, becoming a hub of technological innovation and a provider of essential services. The technological base, the scientific expertise, the intellectual capital required for both endeavors are remarkably similar, almost identical. Only the mission statement changes. It's a choice between a path of endless military escalation or a path of sustainable economic development and regional leadership through peaceful innovation. The decision ultimately rests with Islamabad. Conclusion, final takeaway. So, to circle back to our original question, is Pakistan building an ICBM? The evidence, when meticulously pieced together, paints a compelling, if unsettling, picture. The hardware is undeniably inching together, piece by crucial piece. The money, despite Pakistan's precarious economic situation, is clearly bleeding out into this ambitious program. And the strategic appetite for such a weapon, driven by a complex mix of deterrence, prestige, and perceived necessity, is undeniably real. Even if that rocket never leaves its heavily fortified silo, even if it remains a weapon of last resort, the sheer ambition alone, the capability it represents, fundamentally rewrites the rules of deterrence across 3 continents. The paradox remains stark and glaring. Pakistan's official nuclear doctrine still, publicly at least, says India, but its engineering, its clandestine purchases, and its strategic rationale all point unequivocally towards the globe. Whichever statement ultimately wins this internal and external tug of war, the official doctrine or the undeniable engineering. One thing is certain: the world after that commercial satellite photo, the world that now knows the true extent of Pakistan's ambition, is no longer the world before it. The next move, the truly decisive one, belongs not to supercomputers calculating trajectories, or to shadowy spy agencies deciphering intelligence. It belongs to voters, to taxpayers, and to informed viewers like you, who ultimately decide whether 21st century security means an endless, terrifying race to build more and bigger rockets, or whether it means embracing smarter, more creative, and ultimately more sustainable diplomacy. The choice in the future is in our hands.